Good evening, and welcome back. Before we journey into another forgotten chapter of history, allow yourself a moment to leave the weight of today behind. Close your eyes, take one slow, deep breath, inhale the quiet around you, and gently exhale every lingering worry. Feel your shoulders soften, your hands become still, your thoughts drift farther away with each calm breath. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else demanding your attention. Only the sound of my voice, and a story that has waited more than 2,000 years to be told. Take another breath, slower this time, and imagine the cool wind crossing an endless desert. Hear the distant rustle of palm leaves beside ancient rivers, the faint crackle of ceremonial torches, the quiet footsteps of palace guards pacing polished stone corridors. Somewhere beyond the darkness, beneath a sky crowded with brilliant stars, an empire stands at the height of its glory. Gold fills its vaults, armies stretch beyond the horizon, and kings believe their power will never fade. But history has never feared power. History waits, history watches, and sometimes it chooses a single object, not a sword, not an army, but a crown, to become the spark that sets an empire ablaze. That crown rested upon the head of one man, Darius III, the last great king of Persia. Long before his name became entwined with defeat, Darius awoke each morning inside the magnificent royal palace of Persepolis, surrounded by riches so immense that even seasoned travelers struggled to describe them. Towering columns carved with mighty bulls supported vast halls where polished marble reflected the glow of hundreds of oil lamps. Walls shimmered with brilliant blue tiles. Golden reliefs portrayed kings receiving tribute from distant lands. Every corridor whispered the same message: the king rules by the will of heaven. Yet beneath the polished stone, uncertainty had already begun to spread. Darius had not been born expecting to rule the greatest empire on earth. Others had stood closer to the throne. Others possessed stronger claims. Some disappeared quietly. Some died suddenly. Others simply learned never to challenge the ambitions of powerful families within the court. When fate finally placed the royal crown upon Darius's head, it did not feel light. It felt impossibly heavy, because every jewel carried expectation. Every emerald reflected another rival. Every ruby concealed another secret. Each morning the royal court assembled before sunrise. Nobles knelt. Military commanders lowered their eyes. Messengers from Egypt, Babylon, Phoenicia, and distant Bactria arrived bearing gifts wrapped in silk and sealed with wax. They bowed deeply. Yet while their voices praised the great king, their eyes measured him. Was he strong enough? Would he protect their wealth? Could he protect their wealth? Could he preserve an empire stretching farther than any man could ride within a single season? Darius noticed everything. A hesitation before an answer, a whispered conversation ending as he approached, a general refusing to meet another commander's gaze. Power sharpened the senses, but it also poisoned trust. One afternoon, an elderly advisor carefully unfolded an ancient map across a cedar table inside the royal chamber. The western frontier grows restless, he warned quietly. Darius studied the coastline. Greek cities stirred once again. Trade ships carried strange rumors across the sea. One name appeared repeatedly: Alexander, a young Macedonian king, bold, fearless, unpredictable. Several nobles laughed openly. A boy, a reckless dreamer. He threatens Persia? The room filled with quiet amusement. Only Darius remained silent. He had learned that history rarely announced danger with thunder. Sometimes it arrived wearing confidence instead of armor. He dismissed the court, but kept his most trusted generals behind closed doors. If these reports are true, he spoke slowly, we prepare now. One commander nodded immediately. Another hesitated, only for a heartbeat. Yet Darius noticed. The smallest hesitation inside a palace could one day become betrayal upon a battlefield. As preparations quietly spread across the empire, another struggle unfolded inside Persepolis itself. The royal princes watched one another carefully. Each understood a truth few dared speak aloud. Crowns attract loyalty, but they attract ambition even faster. Some believed Darius had inherited power through necessity. Others believed another branch of the royal family deserved the throne. Smiles filled the banquet halls. Wine flowed generously. Music echoed through golden chambers. Yet beneath every celebration, invisible alliances formed. Promises were whispered. Gold changed hands beneath embroidered robes. The empire still looked magnificent from the outside. Inside, its foundations had already begun to crack. Late that night, Darius stood alone upon the palace terrace, overlooking Persepolis. Below him, thousands of lamps illuminated gardens, fountains, and magnificent halls filled with unimaginable treasure. Everything seemed peaceful, everything appeared eternal. Yet the desert wind carried a strange chill. He removed the royal crown for only a moment and held it between his hands. Its gemstones glittered beneath the moonlight. Beautiful, magnificent, dangerous. He wondered whether he truly possessed the crown, or whether the crown had already begun possessing him. Behind him, soft footsteps echoed through the darkness. Someone had approached the king without announcement, and before dawn, a single whispered conversation inside the royal palace would begin a conspiracy capable of destroying the greatest empire the ancient world had ever known. The footsteps stopped just beyond the circle of moonlight. Darius did not turn immediately. Years at court had taught him that silence often revealed more than words. He slowly placed the crown back upon a carved ivory table before facing the visitor. It was Artabanus, one of his oldest generals, a man whose beard had turned silver through decades of loyal service. He bowed deeply, yet there was tension in his eyes. "My king." "There are whispers." Darius remained still. "There are always whispers." Artabanus nodded. "These are different." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until even the night wind seemed unable to carry the words. "Several noble families have begun meeting after sunset. They speak of uncertainty, of succession, of whether the empire is strong enough to survive another great war." Darius's expression did not change. Inside, his pulse quickened. The enemy had not crossed the frontier. The first battle had already begun inside his own palace. The following morning, the great hall glittered with impossible wealth. Massive golden incense burners filled the air with the scent of cedar and myrrh. Musicians played softly while servants carried silver trays overflowing with figs, dates, roasted lamb, and dark wine from distant vineyards. Hundreds of officials gathered beneath towering stone columns. Every smile looked genuine. Every greeting sounded warm. Every compliment concealed calculation. Darius walked slowly between them. He noticed conversations ending as he approached. Hands withdrew from hidden exchanges. Eyes shifted away for only an instant. Tiny moments, almost invisible, but power taught a king to measure danger in heartbeats rather than hours. Someone was organizing the court. Someone believed the throne could change hands. The only question was when. Far beyond Persepolis, another king studied maps beneath the light of a single oil lamp. Alexander of Macedon, young, brilliant, relentlessly ambitious. His companions urged caution. Persia possessed countless soldiers, endless treasure, cities larger than anything Greece had ever known. Yet Alexander smiled. The larger the empire, the slower it moves. He did not fear Persian numbers. He believed great kingdoms collapsed long before their walls did. They collapsed when trust disappeared, His invasion would not begin with swords. It would begin with doubt. Weeks later, merchants arriving from Asia Minor brought alarming reports. Entire coastal cities had opened their gates without prolonged resistance. Macedonian banners now flew where Persian standards had once dominated. Inside the royal council chamber, voices rose immediately. "We must crush him now! Send every army west!" "No," another noble interrupted. "Protect the treasury first." The argument exploded. Generals shouted across the chamber. Governors blamed neighboring provinces. Some demanded immediate battle. Others insisted on negotiation. Only Darius remained silent. He watched them, not listening to their words, watching their faces. Fear stripped away masks faster than any interrogation. One governor argued too passionately against mobilization. Another repeatedly avoided eye contact. A wealthy satrap quietly supported every proposal that delayed military action. Delay benefited only one man, Alexander. That evening, Darius summoned his most trusted commander in secret. "You will investigate every noble attending these private gatherings." The general hesitated. "They are powerful families. So was my father. So were the kings before him. They still died." The room fell silent. Darius stepped toward an enormous golden relief depicting generations of Persian rulers. Empires are rarely destroyed from outside. He touched the carved crown above one ancient king. They rot from within. The commander bowed. Before sunrise, royal spies disappeared into the streets of Persepolis. Some disguised themselves as servants, others as merchants. Some entered banquet halls carrying wine. Others swept palace floors while listening to conversations never intended for royal ears. Every whisper became evidence. Every secret became another thread leading toward conspiracy. The first report arrived 3 nights later. A prince had accepted gifts from influential nobles. The second report was worse. Several military officers had begun moving loyal soldiers closer to the capital without informing the king. The third report chilled Darius completely. One trusted advisor, a man welcomed into the royal palace for years, had secretly exchanged letters with governors questioning whether another ruler might better preserve Persia's future. No names appeared. If the king failed, others stood ready. Darius crushed the scroll inside his hand, not because he feared rebellion, because he no longer knew whom he could trust. Outside the palace, the people remained unaware of the storm gathering above them. Markets overflowed with spices from India, ivory from Africa, silk from the east, and precious metals from every corner of the empire. Children chased one another through crowded streets while craftsmen shaped jewelry fit for royalty. Persepolis still looked immortal. Its gates remained magnificent. Its treasury remained unimaginably rich. Its temples still echoed with prayer. But kingdoms often appear strongest just before they begin to fall. Near midnight, a hooded messenger slipped through a hidden entrance beneath the palace walls. He carried no royal seal, only a narrow strip of parchment wrapped around a bronze ring. The message contained just one sentence. "The Macedonian advances faster than expected." Below it, one symbol, a crown, split cleanly down the middle. Darius stared at the mark for a long moment. It was not a military warning. It was a promise. Someone inside Persia already believed the empire had been divided before a single decisive battle had even begun. Far to the west, Alexander's army continued marching relentlessly toward the heart of the Persian world. Closer still, the first traitor prepared to reveal himself. Sleep refused to visit the royal palace that night. Torches burned along the stone corridors until dawn, their flames swaying with every draft that slipped through the towering halls of Persepolis. Darius remained awake, the broken crown symbol resting on the cedar table before him. It was only ink upon parchment, yet it carried more weight than an army. Somewhere inside his empire, someone had already imagined a Persia without its king. Before sunrise, another messenger arrived. He had ridden for days without stopping. His horse collapsed outside the palace gates. The young courier staggered into the throne room, covered in dust and dried blood. "My king," his voice cracked. "Alexander has crossed into the empire." Silence. No one questioned the report. No one denied it. The impossible had become reality. The war had begun. Within hours, Persepolis transformed. The music disappeared. Banquets ended. Goldsmiths stopped crafting ceremonial ornaments and began repairing armor instead. Blacksmiths worked day and night, their hammers striking glowing steel until sparks filled the darkness like swarms of fireflies. Across the empire, royal commands raced along the king's road. Summon every satrap, gather every cavalry regiment, prepare the immortals, open the royal granaries. The great king would meet the invader himself. Yet, even as thousands prepared for war, another battle unfolded behind closed doors. One without swords, one fought with whispers. Inside a secluded chamber beneath the palace, several influential nobles gathered around a single oil lamp. No servants, no guards, only men whose fortunes depended upon the future of Persia. One prince spoke first. "If Darius wins, we remain loyal." Another shook his head. "And if he loses?" No answer came. Instead, every eye drifted toward a wealthy governor who quietly produced a sealed letter. "The Macedonian promises mercy." The room grew colder. "He offers positions, land, wealth. If we recognize him..." The oldest noble slammed his fist against the table. "You would betray Persia. I would preserve my family." The words hung in the darkness. The words hung in the dark. No one challenged them, because each man had secretly asked himself the very same question. Where does loyalty end when survival begins? Darius sensed the change immediately. Reports from his spies became inconsistent. Trusted officials suddenly fell ill whenever summoned. Military supplies failed to arrive on schedule. Entire cavalry units marched slower than expected. Coincidences accumulated. One delay could happen. 2 delays invited suspicion. A dozen delays signaled conspiracy. He summoned General Artabanus once again. "Tell me the truth." The old commander hesitated only briefly. "My king, some already believe the empire cannot defeat Alexander." Darius looked toward the royal crown resting upon its crimson cushion. "They doubt me," Artabanus answered quietly. "They fear defeat more than they doubt you." Darius closed his eyes. Fear. It spread faster than plague. It infected loyalty. It transformed honorable men into careful survivors. It convinced ambitious men that betrayal was wisdom. Alexander had not conquered Persepolis. Fear already had. Weeks later, the Persian army assembled across endless plains beneath banners embroidered with gold. Tens of thousands of soldiers stretched beyond the horizon. Heavy cavalry polished their armor until it reflected the morning sun. War elephants shifted impatiently beside towering chariots fitted with razor-sharp blades. It was a force unlike anything the ancient world had ever witnessed. When Darius rode before his soldiers wearing the royal crown, an enormous cheer erupted. The earth itself seemed to tremble. For a brief moment, confidence returned. Perhaps the empire truly remained invincible. Perhaps Alexander had marched too far. Perhaps history would remember this as the day Persia crushed its reckless challenger. But confidence built upon fear rarely survives its first test. Across the battlefield, Alexander studied the enormous Persian host. His generals urged caution. "We are outnumbered." Alexander smiled faintly. "They stand together." He pointed toward the distant ranks, "But they do not trust one another." He had spent months learning exactly where Persia was weakest. Not its walls, not its treasury, not its armies, its divided heart. He intended to strike there first. As dawn painted the horizon in crimson light, both armies prepared for battle. Soldiers tightened leather straps. Archers tested bowstrings. Horsemen whispered final prayers. Darius adjusted the crown upon his head one last time. It glittered brilliantly beneath the rising sun, a symbol of absolute authority, a reminder of generations of kings, a promise that Persia would endure forever. Then, far across the plain, a cloud of dust appeared. Alexander had begun his advance, and hidden somewhere within Darius's own ranks, one commander was already preparing to betray the king at the worst possible moment. The first sound was not the clash of steel, but the low, thunderous rumble of thousands of marching feet. It rolled across the plain like an approaching storm. Dust rose into the morning air, veiling the horizon until the sun itself seemed to fade behind a curtain of earth. Darius sat motionless atop his royal chariot, the golden crown gleaming above his brow. Around him, the banners of Persia stretched farther than the eye could follow. His army was larger, richer, more magnificent than anything Alexander had ever faced. Yet numbers could not silence doubt. The battle began. Persian cavalry surged forward first, their horses pounding the ground in perfect rhythm. Chariots fitted with scythe blades raced behind them, designed to tear through enemy formations with terrifying speed. Thousands of arrows darkened the sky before descending toward the Macedonian lines. For a brief, glorious moment, it seemed as though Persia would overwhelm the invaders. The first ranks of Alexander's army staggered beneath the assault. Cheers erupted across the Persian line. Officers shouted in triumph. Some believed victory had already arrived, but Alexander had been waiting for exactly this moment. Instead of resisting head-on, he shifted his cavalry to one side, drawing the Persian attack farther from its center. The immense Persian army began to stretch, then bend, then slowly lose its perfect formation. Tiny gaps appeared, small at first, almost invisible. Alexander saw every one of them. Forward, his companion cavalry exploded into motion. They did not attack the strongest part of the Persian army. They drove directly toward its weakest point. Like a spear piercing silk, the disciplined Macedonian formation cut through the widening gap before Persian commanders could react. Confusion spread instantly. Orders collided. Messengers galloped in opposite directions. One general believed the left flank had collapsed. Another thought the center was under attack. No one possessed the complete picture. Inside the chaos, fear returned. Darius watched desperately as dust swallowed entire sections of his army. He demanded reports. None arrived. He ordered reserves forward. Some obeyed, others hesitated. Then came the moment he had feared since receiving the Broken Crown message in Persepolis. One cavalry commander, a man entrusted with protecting the king's flank, turned his soldiers away from the battle, not toward Alexander, away from him. Another unit followed, then another. No dramatic declaration, no shouted betrayal. Only thousands of men quietly abandoning their positions at the exact moment they were needed most. The hole inside the Persian line widened catastrophically. Alexander charged directly through it. The conspiracy had finally revealed itself. The Ionian king was suddenly visible. His armor flashed beneath the sun. His cavalry thundered straight toward the royal chariot. Persian guards rushed forward, throwing themselves into the path of the advancing enemy. The collision was devastating. Spears shattered. Horses screamed. Men disappeared beneath waves of steel. General Artabanus fought with astonishing courage, cutting down attacker after attacker while shouting for the king to withdraw. "My king! You must leave!" Darius gripped the sides of his chariot. Everything inside him rebelled against retreat. A Persian king did not flee. A Persian king stood until victory or death, but around him, reality unfolded with brutal speed. His personal guard was shrinking. The enemy was closing. Trusted commanders were nowhere to be found. The crown that symbolized absolute power could not stop a single spear. A frightened driver cracked the reins. The royal chariot lurched backward. Darius looked over his shoulder one final time. He saw Persian banners falling into the dust. He saw loyal soldiers making impossible last stands. He saw generals searching desperately for orders that would never come. Then he saw something that pierced deeper than any blade. One nobleman knelt before Alexander's advancing cavalry. Not as a prisoner, as a man offering surrender. The empire was collapsing before the battle had even ended. News spread faster than the retreat itself. The king has fled. Whether true or exaggerated no longer mattered. Panic swept across the Persian army. Entire formations dissolved. Some soldiers threw down their weapons. Others fled toward distant hills. Officers screamed for discipline, but their voices vanished beneath the roar of thousands running for survival. Alexander did not waste the opportunity. His army pressed relentlessly forward. The greatest military force in the ancient world had become a frightened crowd, not because every soldier had been defeated, but because belief had been defeated. Night finally covered the battlefield. Far away, beneath the shelter of a temporary camp, Darius removed the royal crown with trembling hands. It no longer felt magnificent. It felt unbearably heavy. Every jewel reflected another mistake. Every golden curve reminded him of another commander whose loyalty had dissolved when tested. Artabanus entered the tent, his armor stained with blood and dust. "My king," he hesitated. Many governors have already begun sending envoys to Alexander. Darius closed his eyes. The battle had been lost. Now, the empire itself was beginning to choose a new master. Outside the tent, exhausted horses shifted restlessly beneath the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, another trusted noble was already riding away, carrying a secret message that would become the greatest betrayal of Darius's life. Spears shattered, horses screamed, men disappeared beneath waves of steel. General Artabanus fought with astonishing courage, cutting down attacker after attacker while shouting for the king to withdraw. "My king, you must leave! My king!" Darius gripped the sides of his chariot. Everything inside him rebelled against retreat. A Persian king did not flee. A Persian king stood until victory or death. But around him, reality unfolded with brutal speed. His personal guard was shrinking. The enemy was closing. Trusted commanders were nowhere to be found. The crown that symbolized absolute power could not stop a single spear. A frightened driver cracked the reins. The royal chariot lurched backward. Darius looked over his shoulder one final time. He saw Persian banners falling into the dust. He saw loyal soldiers making impossible last stands. He saw generals searching desperately for orders that would never come. Then he saw something that pierced deeper than any blade. One nobleman knelt before Alexander's advancing cavalry, not as a prisoner, as a man offering surrender. The empire was collapsing before the battle had even ended. News spread faster than the retreat itself. The king has fled. Whether true or exaggerated no longer mattered. Panic swept across the Persian army. Entire formations dissolved. Some soldiers threw down their weapons. Others fled toward distant hills. Officers screamed for discipline, but their voices vanished beneath the roar of thousands running for survival. Alexander did not waste the opportunity. His army pressed relentlessly forward. The greatest military force in the ancient world had become a frightened crowd, not because every soldier had been defeated, But because belief had been defeated, night finally covered the battlefield. Far away, beneath the shelter of a temporary camp, Darius removed the royal crown with trembling hands. It no longer felt magnificent. It felt unbearably heavy. Every jewel reflected another mistake. Every golden curve reminded him of another commander whose loyalty had dissolved when tested. Artabanus entered the tent, his armor stained with blood and dust. "My king?" He hesitated. "Many governors have already begun sending envoys to Alexander." Darius closed his eyes. The battle had been lost. Now, the empire itself was beginning to choose a new master. Outside the tent, exhausted horses shifted restlessly beneath the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, another trusted noble was already riding away, carrying a secret message that would become the greatest betrayal of Darius's life. Oaths were rewritten. One simple conclusion united them all. As long as Darius lived, they would always remain servants. If Darius disappeared, one of them could become king. The crown had begun whispering to new masters. One cold night, the conspiracy finally moved. While the royal escort slept, armed officers entered the king's tent. Darius reached instinctively for his sword, but loyal guards were already overwhelmed. Artabanus fought desperately outside, cutting down attackers despite his age, shouting for the king to escape. He fell beneath a storm of blades, still trying to reach his sovereign. Inside the tent, Darius stared at the men surrounding him. Some had shared his table. Others had sworn sacred oaths before the gods. Now they avoided his eyes. Not because they hated him, because shame is hardest to carry when betrayal stands only a few feet away. They bound the great king in golden chains taken from his own treasury. The ruler of the largest empire on earth had become a prisoner of his own commanders. As dawn approached, the conspirators loaded Darius into a covered wagon and pushed eastward, hoping to outrun Alexander and present themselves as Persia's new rulers. But greed rarely waits patiently. The closer Alexander came, the more frightened the traitors became. They no longer wanted a living king. They wanted proof that the old empire was truly finished. Behind the rolling wagon, one officer quietly loosened his sword. Another exchanged a silent glance. Bessus gave the smallest nod. The decision had been made. The final betrayal was only moments away. The wagon rolled slowly across the lonely plains beneath a silent morning sky. Every turn of its wooden wheels echoed through the empty landscape like the ticking of an unseen clock, counting down the final moments of an empire. Inside, Darius III lay bound, bruised, and exhausted. The man who had once commanded millions now possessed nothing except his memories, and the crushing realization that he had not been defeated by Alexander alone. He had been abandoned. The crown had not slipped from his head because of a single battle. It had been stripped away, piece by piece, by fear, by ambition, and by the quiet hunger of men who believed power belonged to whoever reached for it first. Outside the wagon, Bessus rode in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. Every conspirator understood what had to happen before Alexander arrived. A living king could reclaim loyalty. A dead king could never return. The command came without ceremony. Several horsemen pulled alongside the wagon. The driver slowed. The curtain was thrown open. For one brief moment, Darius looked into the faces of the men he had trusted. There was no anger left inside him, only disappointment, only weariness, only the terrible sadness of discovering that betrayal always arrives wearing a familiar face. One spear struck first, another followed, then another. The great king collapsed against the wooden frame of the wagon as his blood slowly stained the royal garments he still wore. The conspirators rode away, not as victors, but as frightened men fleeing the consequences of their own choices. They left the dying king alone beneath the vast Persian sky. Hours later, Alexander's cavalry finally caught up with the abandoned wagon. The Macedonian soldiers approached cautiously, expecting another ambush. Instead, they found silence. Alexander himself stepped down from his horse and climbed inside. There, lying among broken chains and blood-soaked cloth, was Darius III, the last great king of Persia. History tells us that Darius was either already dead or died only moments after Alexander reached him. Ancient sources differ on the exact final exchange, but many describe Alexander covering his fallen rival with his own cloak as a gesture of respect for a defeated king. The conqueror, who had spent years chasing his greatest enemy, did not celebrate. There was no laughter, no triumph, only quiet, because even victory can feel strangely empty when someone else commits the final act of betrayal. Alexander ordered that Darius receive a royal burial according to Persian tradition. He would not allow the last king of Persia to disappear like a forgotten prisoner. Ironically, the honor denied by his own nobles was given by the man who had conquered his empire. Bessus proclaimed himself the new ruler, hoping the crown would finally become his. Instead, it became his curse. Alexander pursued him relentlessly across the eastern provinces. The governors who had joined the conspiracy quickly abandoned him, just as they had abandoned Darius. Captured by his own former allies, Bessus was delivered in chains. He was publicly mutilated and executed for treason. The very betrayal that had raised him toward power became the reason for his destruction. History has repeated this lesson countless times. Those who seize a throne through betrayal often discover that betrayal never serves only one master. Alexander continued eastward, absorbing what remained of the Persian Empire. Its armies disappeared. Its kings were gone. Its royal palaces slowly became monuments to another age. Yet one symbol survived beyond every battlefield: the crown, not the physical object alone, but the idea, the promise that absolute power could be possessed. Again and again, rulers reached for it. Again and again, kingdoms fractured beneath its weight. Empires rarely die from a single enemy standing beyond their borders. More often, they weaken quietly from within, through suspicion, through ambition, through trusted hands willing to exchange loyalty for opportunity. Today, the ruins of Persepolis still rise from the Iranian plateau, their towering stone columns reaching toward a sky that has watched empires come and go for more than 2,000 years. Carved reliefs still depict proud kings receiving tribute from distant nations, frozen forever in moments when Persia believed its greatness would never end. Visitors walk those silent halls and imagine unimaginable wealth, unmatched power, endless glory, yet the stones whisper a different truth. No throne is permanent. No empire is eternal. No crown can protect the one who forgets that loyalty must be earned every single day. Perhaps that is why the story of Darius still echoes across history. Not because he lost an empire, but because he revealed something timeless about human nature. The greatest danger to any kingdom is not always the army beyond its walls. Sometimes it is the ambition quietly growing inside the hearts of those standing closest to the throne. And somewhere, beneath the winds that still sweep across the ancient ruins of Persepolis, history continues to whisper the same warning. Power can build an empire, but unchecked ambition can erase it forever.